The year is 1929. Chicago is a city of shadows and whispers. The rattle of the elevated train echoes through canyons of steel. On the streets below, another power rules. A power built on fear. This is the Chicago of Al Capone. The name itself is a weapon. It conjures images of violence. The Thompson submachine gun. The bloody aftermath of the St. Valentine's Day massacre. This is the Capone of legend. The brutal mob boss. The undisputed king of the underworld. But that story is only half the truth. The real story is not just about bullets. It's about business. It's about a hidden empire. And its downfall came not from a rival gangster's gun, but from a quiet war waged with pencils and paper. This is the story of the real Al Capone, the CEO of crime, and the surprising truth of how he was finally exposed. Prohibition was the law of the land. The 18th Amendment had made America dry, at least on paper. For a young Alphonse Capone, it wasn't a law. It was a business opportunity. A vast, untapped market was born overnight, and he intended to control it. He didn't see himself as a simple thug. He saw himself as a provider, a public servant giving the people what they wanted. He organized his operations like a modern corporation. He had departments: manufacturing, distribution, and retail. His breweries, hidden in plain sight, were his factories. They worked day and night, churning out millions of gallons of illegal beer and spirits. Armored trucks, his delivery fleet, rumbled through the city streets. They moved with impunity. The speakeasies were his storefronts, thousands of them, hidden behind false doors, in basements and back rooms. Each one paid tribute to the boss. Capone's product was everywhere. His reach was absolute. He was more efficient than Ford, more profitable than U.S. Steel. By the mid-1920s, his organization was a machine, a finely tuned engine of profit. Estimates placed his income at over $100 million a year, an astronomical sum for the time. It was cash, untraceable, unstoppable. He built a system. He diversified his portfolio: gambling dens, brothels, protection rackets. Every enterprise fed the central treasury. He was the chairman of the board of a criminal conglomerate. Violence was a tool, yes, a tool for hostile takeovers, a way to eliminate the competition. But it was never the foundation of his power. The foundation was organization. It was logistics. It was the cold, hard logic of supply and demand. Capone had turned a national ban into a personal gold mine. He had built an empire that seemed untouchable. An empire this vast cannot exist in a vacuum. It requires protection. It requires influence. Capone understood this better than anyone. His greatest investment was not in guns or trucks. It was in people. He bought the city of Chicago. Piece by piece, police captains received thick envelopes of cash. Their officers were instructed to look the other way. Judges were on the payroll. Cases against his men would vanish from the docket. Politicians owed him their careers. Mayor William Hale Thompson, Big Bill, was a close associate. Capone's money and muscle ensured his elections. In return, the city was his. He operated with complete immunity. He was a paradox, a notorious criminal, and a beloved public figure. He attended the opera. He was seen at charity events. When the Great Depression hit, he opened soup kitchens. He fed thousands of unemployed Chicagoans. The newspapers loved him. He gave interviews. He cultivated an image of a benevolent rogue, a man of the people. He would say, "I am just a businessman, giving the public what they want." To many, he was a folk hero, a symbol of rebellion against an unpopular law. But behind the curtain, The system was rotting. The corruption was absolute. The rule of law had been replaced by the rule of Capone. This is when Washington finally took notice. The federal government could no longer ignore the open sore that was Chicago. They sent their best man, a federal agent from the Prohibition Bureau. His name was Eliot Ness. Ness assembled a small, hand-picked team. They were young, ambitious, and reputedly incorruptible. The press called them the Untouchables. They conducted high-profile raids. They smashed breweries. They seized trucks. They made headlines across the country. It was great theater. But it was just that, theater. Ness and his men were a nuisance to Capone. A public relations problem. They could intercept a shipment here, a brewery there. But they could not touch the heart of the empire. They could not touch the money. They could not touch the political machine. For every brewery Ness smashed, Capone had 10 more. For every dollar lost, millions more flowed in. Capone remained untouchable. He laughed at Ness's efforts. He was the king of Chicago. And no G-man with an axe could dethrone him. The real threat was already gathering. It wasn't in Chicago. It was in a quiet office in Washington, D.C., and its soldiers carried ledgers, not shotguns. The United States Treasury Department had a different idea. They saw Capone not as a gangster, but as a tax cheat. A 1927 Supreme Court ruling, United States versus Sullivan, was the key. It declared that even illegal income was subject to income tax. This gave the government a new weapon, a powerful one. A small, secret team was formed, the Special Intelligence Unit. Their leader was a man named Frank J. Wilson. Wilson was the opposite of Capone. He was quiet, methodical, and relentless. He was an accountant. He and his team began a new kind of investigation. They weren't looking for barrels of beer. They were looking for paper trails. The task seemed impossible. Capone never signed a check. He never held a bank account. He dealt only in cash. He left no direct evidence of his wealth. Wilson started from the outside and worked his way in. He and his agents spent months, then years, digging. They analyzed phone records. They tracked telegraph messages. They interviewed hundreds of disgruntled employees and terrified shopkeepers. The break came from a single, dusty ledger. Seized in a raid years earlier, it had been overlooked. It detailed gambling profits from one of Capone's operations. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Wilson's team began to piece together the financial puzzle. They found a bookkeeper willing to talk. They discovered evidence of huge purchases made by Capone in cash, lavish furniture, custom suits, armored cars. They built a case based on net worth. They would prove to a jury that Capone spent a fortune he never declared to the government. The pressure mounted. Capone's men tried to intimidate the investigators. They tried to bribe Frank Wilson, offering him a fortune. Wilson refused. The case was finally ready. In October 1931, Al Capone went on trial. The world expected a spectacle about murder and mayhem. Instead, they heard about accounting, about income and expenditures. The prosecution presented its case with cold, boring precision. They showed the jury the numbers, the undeniable proof of a lavish lifestyle, the undeniable absence of any tax returns. Capone's defense was weak. His lawyers were outmatched by the government's accountants. The jury deliberated. After 9 hours, they returned with a verdict. Guilty, not of murder, not of bootlegging. Guilty of 5 counts of tax evasion. The untouchable king was brought down by arithmetic. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. He was sent first to Atlanta, then to the new super prison, Alcatraz. His empire, built on a complex web of influence and cash, crumbled without him. The system he perfected could not survive without its CEO. The reign of Al Capone was over. It wasn't ended by Eliot Ness's raids. It was ended by Frank Wilson's adding machine. The greatest gangster in American history was defeated by the one thing he could not control, a simple tax ledger. It was a quiet end to a violent era, a final, hidden truth in the life of a man who was more than a myth. He was a businessman. And in the end, the books always have to balance.